Okay, grade 11. This is, what is the date today? It's the 25th of April, so we're coming to the end of the month. And we just had a fairly good team session where we were able to get a little bit of back and forth banter and discussion about the whole issue about oligopolies. And I think we kind of wrapped up that topic fairly well. We're coming to the end of the lockdown, which is really good news. I think we're all kind of celebrating, and we're all very grateful for the government for keeping us safe. And so for that reason, we should be seeing each other face to face pretty soon. I would say that probably in about a week or 10 days, we're probably going to be having classes again. I'm hoping for it. And I sort of feel that that type of social interaction between teacher and students is always super valuable. And I think though that these YouTube videos, as well as those, what do they call them, Office 365 team sessions, they're also quite useful because it means that you're able to ask me a question or I can ask you questions whenever necessary. So today, in fact, we've only got one question because I think we kind of burnt out oligopolies pretty well. We sort of discussed it inside and out. Somebody I think it was this morning, sent me a little note asking whether price discrimination is an example of an oligopoly. Well, it's a good question, and I would say it really depends. It could come from an oligopoly. If you remember, we have different types of price discrimination. You know, you could have price discrimination for cinemas, for example, which will charge a higher price for adults than they do for children. Or, you know, you might have a football game where, you know, all the boys get a blue hat and all the girls get a red hat free by the stadium. I've heard about that in a number of countries. I experienced it myself in Hong Kong about 15, 20 years ago when I noticed that most of the discos in Hong Kong were free for girls, but the boys had to pay $10, which seemed to be, you know, very unfair and very cruel. But of course, you know, they had their profit maximizing objectives. And to answer the question, it really depends on how much monopoly power that the firm has. And so if the firm has enough monopoly power that they can kind of slice up the market between boys and girls or between older people and younger people, then usually it would be a monopoly rather than an oligopoly. But it could be an oligopoly, like airlines are examples of oligopolies, yet they charge, you know, lower prices if you're an infant or if you're a small baby and being held by the mother or father in the airline chair. You virtually get it free or almost free. So these are examples of price discrimination. So normally you're going to find that that monopolies have a total control over prices, and therefore they're actually price makers. But that monopolistic competition and oligopolies tend to use what they call non-price competition. So this is very typical. Things like, you know, offering, you know, on Saturdays they're going to give you a free hat if you come to a football game. And obviously that's a form of sucking you into buying the ticket. And therefore that is price discrimination, and it probably is also an oligopoly. But it really more than being whether it's a monopoly or an oligopoly, it really depends on how much monopoly power that firm actually has. Normally, you're going to find that oligopolies are much more concerned about things like price leadership, and who's leading, in the brand recognition and the market. What percentage of the market is dominated by this firm over that firm, and things like concentration ratios. That tends to be very oligopolistic. But price discrimination, it doesn't necessarily mean that price discrimination equals oligopoly. As I say, it depends on how much monopoly power you actually have. There's kind of an interesting little paragraph that I want to read you. It's on page 187 of the textbook. You might want to get that out. It says the models of market structure make an assumption that whatever the market structure, each firm will seek to maximize its profit all the time. In reality, this is clearly not the case. There is a particularly strong argument for relaxing this assumption when investigating how oligopolists operate. Alternative motives, therefore, often make it difficult to predict the conduct of firms in respect of price and output. Okay, so in some ways what they're saying is that of all the business structures, oligopolies are the least easy to predict their behavior because of the fact that they're always trying to check what the other guy is doing, or whether they're spending a lot of money. They probably send spies to follow what the other company is doing, or what their prices are. They're going to have somebody going to check at the supermarket to find out what the competitive can of beans are being charged, what price is being charged for the alternative can of beans, etc., etc. So for that reason, I hope I answer the question that it's not so much a question of price discrimination equals oligopoly. It's more of a question as to whether that particular example of price discrimination has a lot of monopolistic power involved with it. Now, if you want to read a bit more on price discrimination, there is about a page, I think it's on 186 or 185, I think it is, and they talk about the 3 different degrees of price discrimination. They usually, they ask at least one question, I would say, on the final exam about price discrimination, and I wouldn't kind of memorize the whole page. But as long as you understand that it is done for, reasons of trying to make more money than otherwise would be the case, which would kind of knock out the oligopoly example just by that. But basically, that's what price discrimination is all about. Okay, so let's move on, and we now have the new handout. I sent to you the new handout on monopolistic competition about 20 minutes ago. So you should have it. You should have downloaded it. You should have read it. And you should have it in front of you right now so that you can learn something from this 4th and final business structure. We have so far gone through monopolies. We've gone through perfect competition, which are the 2 extremes at the opposite ends, and now we have kind of the middle road, which is by far the majority of the firms in the country's economy are based on either oligopolies or monopolistic competition. Now, the oligopolies tend to be much bigger companies, but there are much fewer of them. Okay, so things like airlines, which would cost you millions, if not billions, to start up, and then monopolistic competition, which is really the vast majority of little businesses run by a little entrepreneur who's trying to make a little bit of extra money by taking a business which seems to be identical to everybody else's business, but they're doing something a little bit special. They're doing something a little bit different to make them recognize, so that people will notice you, so that you will go out and buy their product rather than somebody else's product. Now, if you look at the handout, you can see the fourth and final graph that I want you to kind of memorize, okay? Because this is, if you ever want to talk about the monopolistic competition, this is the graph that 99.9% of the time do they actually require you to give. Or if you're looking for bonus marks, as I assume you are looking for bonus marks, this is what the graph that you would sort of stick in, okay? And it's kind of helping us to understand both the monopolistic power that is being attempted, which is not at all the same as being a monopoly, okay? So, you know, the sad reality is that it's constantly trying to break out of that rather grim rut of a normal profit, and you're trying to have supernormal profits or abnormal profits any time that you can. So any opportunity to create something different, whether it's in packaging, whether it's in service like delivery or something like that, or whether you make a prestige brand, you call yourself, I don't know, Heaven's Gate. We'll call them my brand, Heaven's Gate. And people say, wow, Heaven's Gate, that sounds really dramatic. I should buy that perfume, okay? Or if I started a deodorant to keep all our underarms smelling nice, then maybe calling it Heaven's Gate will give people the image that, hey, there must be something good going on there because it smells like heaven. Now, I don't know how many people really know what heaven smells like, but this would be a typical example of monopolistic competition, where you're basically just taking the same old stuff that everybody else is producing and trying to package it in a sexy way or advertise it in a dramatic way. I remember seeing, before I left Canada, I remember seeing a Pepsi commercial, and everybody was laughing, and there were lots of young people sitting around a fire, and I don't know, eating marshmallows or hot dogs and drinking Pepsi, and everybody was laughing, and all the men and all the women were super beautiful. And everybody who would look at that advertisement with the nice music in the background, they'd say, wow, I need to get myself a bottle of Pepsi real quick, because that's the lifestyle that I want. Okay, now when you think about it, what are we talking about? We're talking about carbonated water with a lot of sugar and coloring in it, and suddenly you're giving all these images that you're going to be, you know, you're going to have a fantastic sex life or something like that, or you're going to be super beautiful, or you're going to, you know, you're going to have lots of friends, and it's really almost criminal, but people are used to it. And they don't take it too seriously, maybe, I don't know. But it works because, you know, those sort of advertisements are the most successful. And so for that reason, monopolistic competition spends an awful lot of its time sitting around a desk thinking, how can we kind of fool the consumers, you know? I think I gave you the example before of things like travel agencies. I remember in Bangladesh, I had a travel agency that you would just call them up, and the guy would arrive at your door with the credit card machine, and he would deliver it to your door. And so he would take the risk. I mean, because if I said to him at the door that I didn't have any money, then he's actually bought the ticket and he's kind of stuck with the ticket. So he's taking a super risk, you know, as an incredible convenience to buy the ticket and then come and deliver it to me, hoping that I am going to pay the money for the ticket. And of course I would, but I can imagine that level of risk is kind of undesirable. I mean, people don't want to take that type of risk with serious money. Bangladeshis don't earn a lot of money, and if you're talking about a $1,000 ticket to Canada, then that's a serious amount of money. If I say, oh, sorry about that, I made a mistake, I don't have enough money to pay you. Okay, so this is something that, would be a good example of, a monopolistically competitive firm trying to break out of that sort of rut of normal profits that he or she would earn, if in fact he just had a little office in some corner of Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh, and was selling tickets out of his office. The other example in the book was actually a tattoo parlor, which I don't have any tattoos, and I hope you guys don't have any tattoos as well. You may find it interesting to know that in Japan, it's really difficult to get a hotel if you have any visible tattoos, because the Japanese think that you're part of the mafia, you're part of organized crime if you have a tattoo, which is probably a bit unfair to all the tattoo wearers of the world. But anyways, we're getting off the topic. That basically, how do you make yourself special, making tattoos? Well, I assume, I may be wrong, but I assume it's because you are an incredibly talented artist and you really know how to, draw a tattoo on somebody's arm. And that your tattoos are the most beautiful or most incredible or, whatever. Least expensive, perhaps. But most of the time it's going to be on some sort of non-price issue, okay? Because that's really where, you can really get people. Because it's very similar to the characteristics of a perfectly competitive firm, other than that desire of moving from, a homogeneous product to a heterogeneous product. And by so doing, you are moving from a normal profit situation to a supernormal or abnormal situation. Okay? So if you look on the first page, you've got the graph, okay? Memorize the graph. And it gives you in the very beginning, the first sentence virtually is the definition. I usually do that. In a monopolistically competitive market, there are a large number of relatively small buyers and sellers, and no business can have a total control over the market price. Okay, so if they did, then they would be a price maker, that they would have, super monopolistic power, and that's not really what monopolistic competition is all about. Okay, remember I talked about Russia and South Africa kind of monopolizing the gold market, which was a little bit of collusion, and it kind of fed itself into the oligopolistic structure. Well, this one is a bit more difficult because there's a lot of buyers, small buyers and sellers, and it wouldn't be very practical to try to dominate the market so that you can somehow control the prices. Okay, so as there are no barriers to entry or exit, this can unfortunately promote an open season for pirating the ideas and products of other firms. The firms are trying to sell heterogeneous goods from products that are essentially homogeneous, okay? So basically, a travel agent is selling a ticket going from point A to point B, and that's it. And so anything extra, like the carpets on the floor or the parking available or the ability of the retailer to speak another language like English, would all be bonuses, which are attempts by perfectly competitive firms trying to break out of that rut, because nobody wants to be in a normal profit rut. That's surviving. That's it. You're just paying the bills. You're not going anywhere. You're not taking a holiday. You're not doing anything. Okay? So, therefore, consumers perceive that there are non-price differences among the competitors' products, but this unfortunately may be just a marketing illusion. Okay? So, the consumers may come to the conclusion that it's true, that it is true that there is a difference in the quality or the branding or the packaging. The packaging looks a bit more sexy on product A rather than product B. And that could just be an illusion of some guy sitting in an office saying, hey, let's make the products really attractive to the consumers. I apologize for that. My cat just tried to walk across my laptop here, so I'm trying to stop my cat from doing that. So come on, cat. This is not your time for Hollywood here. This is my time, not your time, pussycat, Okay, so as I say, basically it's probably a marketing illusion where, distributors are just trying to give you an idea that, hey, this product is something special, when it's not special at all. And unfortunately, this is how a lot of firms get into business. They sit around and say, okay, well, I don't want to starve to death, so I better start selling something. So they say, well, what can I do that might be able to, feed me or to pay my rent? And they say, hey, I know what I'll do. I'll take some of this liquid soap, and I'm gonna bottle it in a sexy plastic bottle. And I'm going to call my company the Sexy Shampoo Company of Vietnam. And I'm going to have sexy commercials. And I'm going to make a lot of money. And unfortunately, whether you're living in Canada or Vietnam, you're probably going to succeed because the average consumer is going to look at the advertising with all these good-looking people, saying, oh, they just love this shampoo more than somebody else's shampoo. And, this is how they succeed. And so you think that you're getting, value for money when it's not at all the case. And certainly they often use, this illusion of an upward bending demand curve where they're actually charging higher prices than others to give you, again, the illusion that the quality is actually better than the competitors, when this is not necessarily true at all. Okay, so my cat actually moved all my work on my computer screen, so I have to sort of kind of sort this one out here. Okay, I'm back to normal again. Okay, so as I was saying, that the principal goal of a monopolistically competitive firm is to maximize their profits. So there's no doubt about it, okay? Now, I think I said to you before that oligopolistic firms tend to be a little bit less that way, and they tend to be much more into things like price leadership issues. But definitely, these little firms are struggling to make as much money as possible, and they're prepared to do almost anything to achieve their goal. And that's why they may spend substantial amounts of money on advertising, and they would just see the advertising as part of the costs of production and selling the product. So they just include it because they know that something like shampoo is not going to sell by itself. You're going to need to have some sexy person on television telling you that you need to buy some sexy shampoo. And so the sad reality is that a lot of people jump for that and say, oh, well, this must be good stuff. Okay, and I give you a few examples of monopolistic competition: travel agencies, tattoo parlors, drinking clubs, hair salons, for example. How does a hairdresser get the customers to come back? Well, you're hoping that it's because of the skills and the talent of the hairdresser. I mean, you may notice that I just had my hair cut myself. And I just went downstairs, and there's a new hair salon that just started up in that place. And I said, give it the works, And so she just started chopping away, couldn't understand a word of English, didn't know what I was saying. But it was okay, and I'll probably go back to her again because it's more or less what I was looking for. So this is how This is how these little businesses where they're kind of run by one or two people, often in the same family, how they survive. They survive by just trying to give the best service possible, trying to be open on Saturdays and Sundays. I bet if you went down there now, this is Saturday afternoon, they would be open, and on Sundays they would be open. I'm in the process of buying a camera, and I just asked the camera guy in town, I said, are you open Monday to Friday? And he said, you're joking. I'm open every day of the week from I think it was 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. So if you ever saw a monopolistic competitive firm, that would be definitely one where he's hoping to get a bit of loyalty to his business by the fact he's open all the time. Now, is he available for his wife and children? Probably not. So he's probably a lousy father, but he's probably a good businessman, and that's what we're talking about in economics class here. In the short run, as it says on the paper, that the firms can normally earn abnormal profits, if they can somehow give this idea of distinguishing themselves from the competition. Okay, so how do they make themselves special? So consumer loyalty will bring back the customers. Okay, unfortunately, the long-run characteristics of a monopolistically competitive market are almost the same as perfectly competitive markets, and is only differentiated by non-price competition coming from slight product differentiation. The monopolistically competitive firm's demand curve is downward sloping. Okay, I mean, usually you would find that a perfectly competitive one would be perfectly elastic. That would mean that it was horizontal. But there is a certain downward slopiness, and that usually comes from the level of elasticity that exists. And basically, as I said, that the firms, they perform basically the same functions. In other words, a ticket on Vietnam Airlines is going from point A to point B, but have differences in quality such as type, style, quality, reputation, appearance, and location that tend to distinguish themselves from each other. Obviously, if Vietnam Airlines didn't have an office anywhere and you couldn't find them, well, that's probably going to be a disadvantage, and they may actually struggle to get business. So, having their location all over Vietnam and having good parking, etc., etc., they are at the top of their game, maybe because they have more money than other people, because they're probably somehow run by the government, etc., and therefore they might have better locations to have an office from. But the bottom line is that they know that there's a lot of competition, and they have to make themselves somehow special. And they know in their heart that the product is homogeneous, that there's no difference. I mean, maybe some of you would say that Vietnam Air is more comfortable, or I don't know, it does something different than Bamboo Airways or JetSave, or I can tell you JetSave is almost always late. I've taken JetSave about 10 times, and I don't think I've been on time, not even once. So I don't want to I hope that none of you have parents who are working for JetSave, but I would now, I've taken JetSave because I'm always looking for a bargain, and JetSave is the cheapest in town. And I'm a pretty cheap guy. So I said to myself, hey, it's so cheap that I'm willing to sort of be 10, 15 minutes late. But no. We're talking about serious late time. So, Vietnam Airways is pretty on time. And for that reason, I would probably be willing to pay maybe a couple of $100,000 extra to Vietnam Airways to make sure that they are on time. Okay, so if a firm produces a product which is slightly different from that of its competitors, then it has a certain amount of market monopoly power. It will be able to raise the price without losing all of its customers to firms which have kept their prices stable. So it is not a price taker like a perfectly competitive firm. However, because there are a large number of firms in the industry producing relatively close substitutes, its market power is relatively weak. So small changes in price are likely to result in relatively large changes in the quantity demanded, as consumers will switch to close substitutes. If they're relatively elastic. They're not perfectly elastic, but if you kind of push your luck, even Vietnam Airlines, if you give them really bad service, if you give customers a hard time, and that they're much, much more expensive than everybody else, that the average guy, some of you perhaps don't care about the price, but I think that 99.9% of the population of Vietnam, they do care about service and they do care about price. And for that reason, that they are a little bit, at least, a little bit elastic. Okay, that means responsive to a price change. Okay, responsiveness. Now, there are efficiency concerns, okay, with monopolistic competition, in that it fosters a lot of wasteful allocation of resources. Okay, that kind of leads on to the question in the homework. This is based on the waste of money from promotion and advertising. Of course, some people might disagree with that. They might say that advertising is not a waste of money. But it tends to encourage customers to spend more on products because of the name associated with them, rather than rational issues of quality or value for money. And so therefore, there's a certain argument that the allocation of resources, are you really giving the consumers what they want, or are you just creating this marketing illusion that I talked about before? Therefore, in monopolistic competition, the consumer must collect and process information on a large number of different brands to be able to select the best of them. Often the cost of gathering information necessary to select the best brand can exceed the benefits of consuming the best brand measured by marginal utility. So, how do you work out, what is the best product? There are magazines that are called things like a Consumer Report, and I'm sure in Vietnam you've got sort of magazines that talk about brands and which brand is best and that sort of thing. And so, just the effort to try to find out which product is the best and which one is not very good may end up being more expensive than the benefits that you're gaining from making a good selection. Okay, and therefore there's the whole issue of producer sovereignty, that they're able to kind of, I don't want to say they're going to screw you or anything like that, but they are trying their best to take advantage of you. They're going to try to take advantage of your ignorance or your naivety, that you're going to swallow an advertisement of gorgeous looking men and women dancing half naked around a fire and eating sandwiches and drinking Pepsi Cola or something like that. You may actually find that this is a total illusion, and it's actually not at all helpful for the economy. So and some brands, they gain this prestige value by maybe even location. Things like what is it called? Chanel No. 5. Chanel No. 5 is a perfume that really only allows themselves to be sold in what they call prestige locations, like airports or whatever. You don't go to the supermarket to buy Chanel No. 5. They wouldn't allow themselves to be sold in that way. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to give you this sort of image that if you're kind of an important sort of person, and you're kind of prestigious sort of person, you're the sort of person who wants Chanel No. 5. Well, if you've ever heard of a marketing illusion, that's a good one, telling people, massaging their ego, telling them, hey, you're really important, therefore you need Chanel No. 5 perfume. So to finish here, we're just saying that producers often practice product differentiation by altering the physical composition of products and using special packaging, okay, or simply claiming to be a superior product which may have no connection to the truth at all. Okay, so here we got two questions. I don't think they're very difficult. Okay, they should have been dealt with in this handout. How do monopolistically competitive firms promote allocative inefficiency in the economy? Okay, so this is kind of a criticism of monopolistic competition. How are they creating inefficiencies? And we talked about that in the final 10 minutes. Some of the problems of how it actually promotes inefficiencies in society, getting people to waste their money just because the brand sounds sexy or something like that. And then second of all, how can monopolistically competitive firms seek to gain market share and domination? Well, that's a really good question, and that's what every single little hairdresser and tattoo parlor person is trying to work out. How can you gain market share? How can you be better than the next guy? Well, there's no easy answer to that. So try to develop the answer. Don't just give me a 1-sentence or 2-sentence answer. Try to give me a bit of an analysis, maybe a little bit of an example of something happening in Vietnam. How small businesses can break out of that nasty rut we call normal profits and get themselves into the heavenly paradise called abnormal profits or supernormal profits. As I said to you before, a lot of you are going to be hired when you graduate to work for companies to get those companies out of normal profits and into abnormal profits. That's all they want from you. They want ideas. They want you to innovate. They want you to think of a new slogan for their next advertising campaign. They want you to help them to improve their profits, and that's all it is. They don't love your face or love who you are. They want to make profits through you. Now, you might say that that's a bit of exploitation going on, but that may be true. But the bottom line is that a lot of small firms have no choice. They have to do something to break out of the crowd and make people notice. And if you look at most of the big companies today, those big companies used to be small companies, okay? Facebook was nothing, okay? And then slowly it was able to, make itself different than similar type of Facebook web pages. I can't remember the names. There was about, not quite when I was your age, but a little bit older than you, when Facebook first came out, that there were like 3 or 4 of those type of Facebook web pages. And Facebook clearly had to say, well, we got to do something, So they had to think of a new idea or a clever advertising promotion or to try to break out of the mold so that they can improve their profitability. Okay, I don't want to go any further than that. This is my 40 minutes. I usually try to keep it to about 40 minutes. So what can I say? I want to say that I'm super duper looking forward to seeing all of you. I miss all of you. Even those who didn't do their homework, I still love them all. And wash your hands. Keep away from your buddies from getting too close. And just make sure that you're safe and that you're ready to learn, so that we are going to go on and succeed and get fantastic results on the June and the November final results. Okay, so bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.